Hello, YouTube. Tibet, a highly mysterious country. Tibet contains some of the breathtaking historical sites which you basically cannot even imagine would have existed. And one of such is the Guge Kingdom. It is counted amongst the most powerful kingdoms in the Tibetan history, while marking its prevalence since a really long time, standing on a very tall yellow hill that is known to be approximately 300 meters tall, situated at a distance of 18 kilometers from the Zada country. The Grand Empire in ruins is majorly prominent as an immensely significant cultural relic site that is actually still protected. The hill on which it is present is located on the banks of the Zaborang district's Xinhuang River that flows from the Lake Manasarovar in the northwest direction. Apparently, it ruled the western provinces of Tibet starting from the 10th century until the 17th century. And as a conclusion, it is constantly and continually serving as an indispensable element from the fascinating history of Tibet. One will also witness an array of soil forests encompassing the Guge Kingdom while being perched in the Zanda country, leading to the creation of splendid, spectacular civilization. But it suddenly disappeared, leaving a number of mysteries behind. By car from the Guge Kingdom, driving for a few hours, you will see Mount Kailash upon reaching Lake Manasarovar, showcasing the prosperity of this ancient kingdom during the bygone era. Some golden relics of palaces, houses, caves, as well as the monasteries which are piled up on the top of this highly elevated yellow hill. Apparently, during the age of the flourishing of the Guge Kingdom, it served as a very important role in the social, cultural, as well as the economic development of the stunning country of Tibet. It highly supported Buddhism, and thus this empire used to follow the ample principles of Buddhism. And also, this was a place of the ultimate formation of Buddhists' varied forms. This gave rise to a number of philosophies which went viral all across the immense Himalayas, as a result of which many refugees were spotted there from other parts of Tibet. Not only this, but the Guge Kingdom also acted as the finest trade connection of Tibet with other countries. One of the ancient kingdoms of Tibet, this Guge Kingdom was founded in western Tibet, in the area now known as the Ngari Prefecture, around the 10th century. Following the collapse of the great Tuba Empire in central Tibet, the descendants of the last Tuba king moved west to escape the insecure conditions of Yuzhang during a civil war over the succession of the emperor. So after moving west with their followers, the grandson of the last Tibetan monarch and his children established an empire that would last for 700 years, more than 3 times as long as the Tuba kingdom. When during the 9th century, Lang Dharma's assassination was experienced, the Tuba kingdom fell apart, and as a result, it led to the creation of Guge Kingdom by that great grandson of Lang Dharma, again, middle of 10th century. Later on, Jiden Yamagon, 3 sons and their descendants made some efforts and finally set up 3 regimes, namely Guga, Ladakh, and also Burang. Guga's reign has been considered as one of the fastest developed regimes, and it extended over the whole of Ngari in a greatly prosperous manner. I'll give you an example about the influence. Yeshed Od, the king of Guge, conducted a series of cultural and political activities to promote Buddhism, including building the Toling Monastery in 996 Common Era. Later, he sent 21 intelligent young students to India to study language and Dharma, one of whom was Rinchen Bzangpo, who became an outstanding translator with huge contributions to the translation and the transmission of the Dharma. In both Hinduism and Buddhism, Dharma generally refers to a cosmic law or a principle that sustains the universe and guides human conduct. It can encompass duty, virtue, morality, and the right way of living. In Buddhism, Dharma also specifically refers to the Buddha's teachings and the path to enlightenment. After Yeshed Od, the next Guge king, invited the renowned Buddhist scholar Atisha to Tibet. During Atisha's 3-year stay in Toling from 1042 to 1045, he wrote more than 20 books and made distinguished contributions to the spread of Buddhism all over Tibet. As a whole, these cultural activities shaped this great era, which is frequently regarded as the first golden age of the revival of Buddhism. The Guge kingdom is known as a highly mysterious part of the Tibetan history, and the reason behind its sudden disappearance after the war in 1679 is still unresolved. The Guge kingdom definitely was a unique center, whether it be in regards of divinity, history, or sightseeing. There are abundant highlights which describe this empire, and the two most prominent out of them are its distinct construction as well as the preserved artworks. Symbolizing a religious nation as well as peace, the construction of this kingdom is highly unparalleled and also miraculous, as it comprises of 3 levels. Built on an impressive top, monasteries are tucked at a higher location with the palaces spotted on the top. The environment here is totally natural, with soil forests all around. Despite of the kingdom being presently in ruins, there are many monasteries which are unchanged till now, and thus are telling the visitors about the myths and legends as well as the Buddhist history. During its early years, when the kingdom was considered as a prosperous one, it had a population of about, listen to this, 100,000 people. But at the time of its destruction, what happened to its residents is also an unresolved mystery. And this is because when the number of corpses in the caves were calculated, they came out to be far less than 100,000. Well, also the natural disasters, plagues, were not at all enough to prove that they were the cause of this sudden disappearance. They vanished somewhere. So why did this empire, which lasted longer than any other in Tibet, suddenly disappear from the face of the Tibetan plateau, leaving behind only empty houses and broken temples? For many theories, the mystery of the Guge kingdom is comparable to the sudden collapse of the ancient Mayan civilization in South America. So, the ancient kingdom had a population of about 100,000 inhabitants at its height. And despite the various wars, plagues, and conquering of its territory that happened over the course of the years, none of the incidents were enough to completely decimate the civilization to the point where none remained. Today, only a few ruins are all that's left of the huge Guge kingdom, which stretched across Ngari and into Ladakh in what is now Jammu and Kashmir, as well as large parts of what is now Himachal Pradesh in northern India. While this area was a region of dried, hostile desert with fantastic clay forests dotted across the nothingness, there were oases of civilized areas on fertile lands across the desert, and none was more fertile than the area what is now at Saparang in the Garuda Valley, the capital of the Guge kingdom and the site of the prominent Guge ruins. Close to the border with modern-day Ladakh, to the west of Mount Kailash, I'm sure you've heard about this mountain, Tsaparang was a huge fortress that sat perched on a pyramid of rock that rose 500 to 600 feet above the sands. At the end of a long spur of rock and impregnable forest, the tunnels and caves that were the rooms and corridors of this palace were carved out of the very rock of the outcrop, and lying at its base was the village of the common people. What there is now today, the remains of a huge clay fortress perched on a pyramid-shaped cliff containing numerous tunnels and caves carved out of the rock. The kingdom's common people occupied the lowest levels, while the level above were public temples and monks' quarters. At the top, in an open space, stood the royal palace. Variously, the Guge kingdom was dominated by first the original grandson of the last Tibetan emperor and his 3 male heirs. A Mongol invasion in the 13th century followed, a Sakya monastic regime in the 14th century, and once again by the natural-born kings. In the early 17th century, there was a revolt from Ladakh, and the forces of the Ladakhi people laid siege to Tsaparang, the impenetrable city. And this is where the details become vague as to what happened and why the civilization vanished. After treacherous advice from the chief lama of the Buddhist temple in Tsaparang, who was also the brother of the pro-Christian king, the city is said to have surrendered to Ladakh. The Jesuits, Andrade and Marquez, arrived at Tsaparang, the capital of the Guge kingdom, in early 1624. Strategically located on the Silk Road, Tsaparang was then a thriving fortress city, but due to its unfertile land, it depended totally on imported food. Many traders bought goods from Central Asia and China, and the king received the Jesuits with immense hospitality, permitting them to set up a small church. The perceived favoritism towards the Christians was viewed negatively by the Buddhists of Tsaparang, and upon the departure of the Jesuits, the locals cajoled the king of Ladakh to invade, ultimately leading to the demise of the kingdom and leaving behind a mere shell of the once glorious palace at Tsaparang. One legend tells of how the people continued to survive in their usual status while the king was brought to Ladakh as a prisoner. Another legend tells of how the Ladakhi army slaughtered almost all the people, with only a few escaping, who fled to the south, vowing to return and wreak vengeance on the Ladakhi invaders. It is also said that the brother of the king was executed by the Ladakhi army after the surrender, and that the last male descendant of the last king of Guge left for Lhasa and died there in 1743. Yet another hypothesis or account of the history of the city of Tsaparang says that the Guge king threw himself from the cliff and died, although there are no factual records to support any of the stories. One strange legend tells of how the Ladakhi rulers, who were cruel and despotic, forced the Guge people to begin building an aqueduct to siphon the runoff of melting snow and ice from the nearby Mount Kailash. Angered by the arrogance of the Ladakhi rulers against the sacred mountain, the gods laid waste to the city. It is interesting to know that the Guge kingdom and Tsaparang were later recorded to have been conquered by the armies of the central Tibetan government under the rule of the 5th Dalai Lama, Nga Wang Lobsang Gyatso. However, once again, there is a mystery surrounding this. The armies of the Dalai Lama forced out the Ladakhi invaders in 1680 after 50 years of rule and annexed the city of Tsaparang and the entire Guge kingdom. The Buddhist records of the time are clear that the former Guge kingdom was brought into the fold of the central Tibetan government of the Gelug school of Tibetan Buddhism, and that the Gelug lamas were sent to rule the former kingdom. It is said that in the first half of the 20th century, the Tibetan government sent soldiers to Guge to collect taxes under a new taxation policy. For more than 200 years, nothing had come out of Guge in western Tibet. And when the soldiers went to the kingdom to collect the taxes owed, they came back to report that all that was left of this once great kingdom was a deserted and ruined city, the desert already encroaching into the holes and tunnels in the rocks. Many years later, a cave was uncovered among the 879 caves, 445 houses, 25 pagadas, in the vast network of tunnels that made up the upper city. Inside the cave, they found skeletons of around 30 men, and young women were discovered, some wrapped in ancient ropes. However, all of the skeletons found were without heads, and to this day, none of the skulls of the dead Guge inhabitants have ever been found. Some believe this to be a testament to the brutality of the war against the Ladakhi invaders, while others believe it to be a special kind of funeral cavern, as cloth wrappings and braided hair were also found inside the cave. What has never been discovered is why, between the conquering of the Guge kingdom by the central Tibet in 1680 and the arrival of the tax-collecting soldiers in the early 1900s, this wealthy and civilized society vanished almost overnight, leaving nothing behind but the frescoes and murals that adorn the walls of the palace and the pagados. China's State Council declared Tsaparang one of the country's first official cultural heritage sites in 1961. But very little was known at the time in Red China about the ancient kingdom. I found out about Guge and became fascinated and very much interested in the year of 1996 when I bought a Chinese book about the country's archaeological most recent discoveries. The book was in English and sold in a Chinatown bookstore. I also read an Indian research that while the people of Tsaparang adhere to Tibetan Buddhism, a strong influence of Hinduism ran through its foundations. It was a civilization open to different belief systems, a fact reflected in the ancient temple murals that bring together Tibetan, Nepali, Nenewari, and Indian Kashmiri artistic styles and depict both Hindu, Tantric, and Buddhist deities. Unfortunately, many of the murals and statues were destroyed during Red China's Cultural Revolution of 1966. Now the Guge Kingdom is a major tourist attraction in western Tibet, as well as being a rich archaeological site that has a wealth of information on the study of the rise of Buddhism in Tibet. One of the major promoters of the Buddhist religion into Tibet from India, the Guge Kingdom had a significant role in spreading Buddhism across the plateau. Yet this Buddhist state was rocked by war and eventually vanished back into the desert sands from whence it rose. An amazing story of an amazing kingdom in western Tibet. And maybe we will never know what really happened to the inhabitants of this power at one time in the West. And maybe we will. It all depends on how much the archaeologists will find, who will find it, and so forth. And I'll keep you updated about this part of the world because I like to bring up little-known stories in the West about Tibet, about China itself, about, of course, in general, and about Mongolia, and going westward, of course, Central Asia, Russia, Siberia as part of Russia, Yakutia, and so forth. So if you like my research, please kindly support me if you can through the links you'll find in the description to this video. Please subscribe to my channel. Please like my videos. And thank you for your attention to my work.